boys and girls, to another paranormal fireside chat with your host with the mostest, Mike the Naked Bigfoot. Or you can just call me Mike, or the Naked Bigfoot, or Naked. But as always, before we begin tonight's tale, there's of course the disclaimers. All opinions and thoughts are those of your humble host. He's not here to encourage, discourage, influence, and or change the minds or beliefs of anybody who watches or listens to his show. Hey, Chris. Thanks for joining, man. Also, be warned that tonight's episode, as with all episodes of my show, will contain shocking imagery that I will be describing in shocking detail that may bother the some fragile snowflake minds out there. So if you believe that you are too fragile to handle the truths that I offer tonight, or that the usage of foul words and four-letter words and just nasty language in general, and crude jokes on occasion, will be too much for your sensitive palate, please, I ask you to tune me out. But if you do insist on watching, and if you have any small children who you don't wish to pick up any bad habits by listening or watching me, or learn a few new cuss words by listening or watching me, please have them leave the room or wear headphones while you watch my show. Now that's out of the way, I just want to do a quick bit of housekeeping before we begin. I got a really fascinating message today from a viewer who wanted to know why, when I always wear black whenever I do reveal that I'm always wearing a black shirt whenever I do reveal any part of my body, that it's always something black or gray. Just to let everybody know that there are certain colors that a voodoo priest, such as myself at Hongan, they wear daily. There are certain colors of clothing that are not worn unless you're conducting a ceremonial ritual, such as white and red. I do not wear those two colors unless I'm actively in a prayer ritual or a ceremony. So you'll never see me wear those particular colors in everyday life. I hope that answers any questions anybody might have out there. Okay, let's go on with tonight's story. And as always, as you well know, that we do play a drinking game as we go along tonight. If anybody's inclined to drink alcohol or a non-alcoholic beverage, feel free to have it by your side, because every time you hear me say the following phrase, that's a story for another day. Please take a sip of your adult beverage and or adult non-alcoholic beverage. If you do drink your adult beverage with alcohol in it, I strongly advise you not to drink and drive at the end of the show, because there's a good chance you're going to be freaking stone-faced, shit-faced by the time this ends. Okay, everybody's got their beverage in hand. Everybody's ready? Let's begin. Hopefully in upcoming episodes, you'll be hearing more of paranormal and supernatural tales of the state that I live in, which is Virginia. And I live in nestled up against the Blue Ridge Mountains. You started early. A lot of people need to be nice and high and or slightly drunk to listen to me. Trust me, I understand. I live on a farm nestled up against the Blue Ridge Mountains, and there are many tales and experiences both in the Blue Ridge Mountains and throughout the state of Virginia of a paranormal and supernatural nature that I'll be sharing with everybody in upcoming episodes, peppered amongst all the other encounters I had throughout the United States and some countries abroad as I traveled. With that said, um, I think a lot of paranormal investigators and paranormal researchers have a habit of always going to the equivalent of the paranormal tourist traps that are out there, like Bobby Mackey's, the Clown Motel, various famous asylums, Alcatraz, um, certain ghost towns that Goatman's Bridge, that are famous that they are paranormal landmarks out there. But what I find most intriguing and are the local haunted locations and the local paranormal legends of smaller communities. And here in Virginia, especially, and now we've got our paranormal tourist traps here in Virginia, mainly along the coast and up towards Washington, D.C. and Northern Virginia. Um, we don't count Northern Virginia as part of Virginia. We consider that an island unto itself. But that's a story for another day. Um, Here throughout central and south side and southwestern Virginia, there are many locations that are known from by the locals that are of paranormal interest, and some of them are downright terrifying. Great many of them I was able in my time to visit, and a great many of them I was able to go and experience um, paranormal, supernatural, and some happenings at these locations. Um, and I have to say, out of all the places I've visited and different experiences that I had, some of the more memorable and more terrifying encounters that I had happened right here in the state of Virginia. And tonight's tale is going to be dealing with one such instance. Uh, it'll be dealing with a place called Dead Man's Falls. Now, that's not the official name to it. That's what all the locals call it. They call it Dead Man Falls. It's actually called Staten Creek Falls. It's located in Amherst County. More specifically, Amherst County extends partly, and that's in southwestern Virginia, for those who don't know the area. That the Blue Ridge Mountains extend slightly into Amherst County. It's a very rural county. Super old growth forest. It's very sylvan when you go out there. But it is Staten Creek Falls, located in Amherst County, specifically in the George Washington National Forest. It is open to everybody. You do have to cross several pieces of private land, but as long as you don't veer off the road, and it's a long drive to get back there too, up into the mountains. As long as you don't veer off the road and go onto anybody's property, they usually will leave you alone and nobody will fire a load of buckshot at you. Um, I personally had never heard of it. No, this is God. I don't want to age myself too much, but this took this particular instance took this my very first encounter with Satan Falls, Dead Man Falls, um, occurred back in the 90s. I'll have to look at my journal for a specific date, but it was in about the mid 90s. And at that time, I was making a living as a part-time wedding photographer and wedding planner. Um, and I had been asked to, well, I had been contracted to do a wedding of a friend, and they wanted me to do their engagement photos and their wedding photos and their post-wedding photos and anniversary photos. I mean, they had the whole fucking shebang. They were paying money out their ass. I was getting a nice chunk of change out of this job. Um, but they had a specific place in mind. to go have their engagement pictures taken at. And that was and I had never heard of it. But hey, they were paying for it. They were paying for it, so they were paying for my gas, so I happily went there. And they suggested we go to this very scenic and beautiful location in Amherst County called Staten Falls. Fuck, I had never heard of it. I was always up for an adventure. But what got me was when they made a suggestion was they asked me if I would. At the time, I drove a God. I wish I still had it actually. I can't think of the year to it, but it looked like one of the old Vietnam era Jeeps that I drove everywhere. It was a clunker, but that damn thing was a tank. It wasn't much to look at, but it was a tank. You could take that thing off road and take it anywhere on the face of the planet. And they asked if I would drive them up there and they would guide me up there. Um, and I looked at them weird and they said, bring your Jeep because you'll need it. Well, coming to find out, yeah, I did need their Jeep to get up there. Um, the drive was about almost 2 hours off road into the George Washington National Forest. Like I said, they paid out their ass for this. I mean, but it was worth it. I like these kids. They were good clients. They were fun to work with. I would work with them again. I have no idea where the fuck they are in this world. I wish I'd kept track of them, but they were a lot of fun. So I hope they stayed married, and I hope they have thousands of kids. So about an hour and a half or 2 hours drive off road on a sometimes gravel road, sometimes dirt road, sometimes barely a road at all. That was partially kept up by the state um, and partially kept up by the landowners. We arrived at Dead Man Falls, also known as Staten Falls. So I unloaded all my camera gear and got the setup. My clients, they said, "Get your gear, get your backpack, and we'll show you to the falls." Because it was a slight hike down and up the side of a mountain to get to the actual falls. Once we got to the end of the road, I mean, luckily I was in better health and in better shape because my fat ass would have never been able to do that. My half-ass dead life would never been able to get through it now. I would have been dead 15 minutes into the walk. It was insane. We finally got to probably one of the most scenic and beautiful waterfalls, a series of waterfalls I had ever seen this side of Hawaii and Fiji. And I've seen some beautiful waterfalls there um, that were just magical, nestled out here in the middle of the woods with barely any sunlight coming through the canopy of these old growth hardwood forests with barely any light trickling through the canopy. Just rays of light that would illuminate the bits and pieces of the waterfalls and the pools. Now, what made this waterfall really neat? It just wasn't one waterfall. It went, God, 75 to 100 feet up in the air altogether, but it was a series of waterfalls that came off the side of the mountain. That actually, the waterfall, each level of the waterfalls would fall into a natural basin, and then that in turn would be an overflow and create a waterfall that would go into the next basin, which came out into the huge pool at the very bottom, which made up Staten Falls Creek. Yeah, I kept going. So this waterfall originated, the source of it originated within the mountain that it was coming out of, which was beyond beautiful and just absolutely spectacular. Like I said, we got there and it was about 10 o'clock in the morning when we got there. So it was still a nice cool time on a cool day on the side of the mountain. Lots of ferns, lots of, insects you could hear in the woods. The cicadas were, or jar flies as we like to call them out here in the mountains. The jar flies were restless and very loud, putting on quite a show for all of us. And then you had all the mountain critters. You had the squirrels, of course, the great bushy tails out there. We saw a number of deer running through. It felt, it felt very untouched out there. That nature was unafraid of us when we went out there. It was when I was setting up my camera, and see, there was a series of very large rocks in the bottom pool of Staten Falls, the basin where all the falls fell into. Um, there was a series of very large stones in the middle that a person could, literally go out and have a picnic on these big giant flat rocks that were out in the middle of the bottommost pool of Staten Creek Falls. And that's where they wanted to go set up at. They wanted to stand there while I was on shore taking pictures of them across the water with the falls in the background, which I thought, that's going to be fucking beautiful. I loved doing weddings and doing wedding photography in natural settings anyway. But this was absolutely spectacular. And the roar of this water falling off the side of the mountain was absolutely breathtaking. So I set up my equipment. They actually had their formal clothes, what they wanted to wear in the pictures, and totes, waterproof totes, that they took into the water with them, and they walked and swam out to the big stone in the middle of the pool, and of course they got dressed out there and got ready. Um, well, they had a line attached to it, so they put their regular clothes back in the tote so I could pull it up so it wouldn't be in any of the shots. I didn't have to do any trick-ass photography to be able to get good pictures of them without getting pictures of their clothes, the clothes they took off, and the totes in which they had put their gear into. So I pulled that back up on shore. And as I was pulling it on shore, I heard somebody humming. It was a woman. She was humming. Now, this was over, you know, I want you to imagine having your hands over both of your ears. And that's suddenly how the waterfall sounded to me. It sounded muted in the background. And the only sound that overrode that was of a woman humming. A beautiful hum. I didn't recognize the tune, but it was just humming away. A tune I completely did not recognize. Um, and I stopped and I shook my head. And the humming stopped, and I could hear, the muting went away. The hands from my ears felt like had gone away, or the jars over my ears had been removed, and I could hear the waterfall roaring again behind me. But what I didn't hear were my clients standing on the stone yelling my name out, asking if everything was okay, because apparently I had zoned out when the humming had begun, and I had stayed zoned out for almost 15 minutes. They said I was standing in place with my head cocked to the side, staring up at the top of the waterfalls for about 15 minutes. I didn't realize I'd been doing that for 15 minutes until whatever this trance I was placed in, was broken. And they were, of course, worried about me. They said, "Hey, do you want us to come back over? Are you okay?" I yelled back and said, "Nope, I'm okay. Let's get the pictures done." Um, so I started taking pictures. They were posing. I was taking pictures. But as I was taking the pictures from my tripod, and I would set up each shot, and I was using film at the time, actual film. It wasn't digital. Had my own darkroom. I developed all my own pictures. It was a lot of fun back in those days. But that's a story for another day. I kept catching a fleeting glimpse of someone running in the ferns at the base of the falls, of the stones, um, at at the falls. I kept catching a glimpse of something running over there in the ferns. Just a quick glimpse of it. It looked vaguely female every time I saw it. and it was always running towards the base of the falls and then vanishing. I'd catch a little glimpse of it at the corner of my eyes every once in a while. And it was really fucking disconcerting. I stopped for a moment and asked them, I said, do y'all see anybody about fucking behind me? Do y'all see anybody fucking around behind me as I'm taking these pictures? And they said, no, dude, we're all by ourselves up here. There's nobody behind you at all. Um, I said, okay. So I continued to take the pictures. The session went on. Nothing else happened for a while. The session went on for about 45 minutes to an hour until I had to stop and they had to stop and they wanted to change positions and go to a different part of the falls and get some shots in a different part of the falls. So they came back up on shore and we all took a break. They went back up to the Jeep and I stayed down at the falls to secure the film that I'd already taken and start to get some fresh film out and get that loaded up because they wanted me to take some black and white pictures. And I had some good old T-Max film, black and white film that I had broken out to put in my SLR. Single lens reflex, for those who don't know photography. I used to teach photography too in darkroom. But as always, that is a story for another day. And I found me a nice rock to sit on as I was going through my backpack and getting my film ready for the next series of shoots. And I heard from that stand of ferns again. And if remember the ferns here in our mountains are not your typical woodland ferns. Our ferns are fucking huge. They're more like ostrich ferns, if you've ever seen ostrich ferns. They stand between 3 to 4 feet tall. The fronds do. They're huge. Mountain ferns are fucking massive. Not all mountain ferns are, but most of them are absolutely massive. And these things look like a fucking prehistoric jungle area over there beside the falls, because of course they were thriving beside the waterfalls with all the moisture. Um, um, Again, I started catching movement out the corner of my eye, so I looked. And once again, it felt like my ears had been covered. And I was inside of a bubble. Everything was muted around me. And hollow and muted. Everything sounded hollow and muted around me. And I got a little fucking scared at that point. I got a little fucking scared. But I wasn't scared because I was scared because I didn't understand what was going on. I thought maybe I was having a fucking stroke or something. I didn't know. But then I heard in the same tonal inflection as the humming, that woman's voice coming through again, saying, "Follow me, follow me." And I smelled honeysuckle strongly. For those who don't know much about mountain honeysuckle, there is a particular strain of honeysuckle in the mountains here in the Blue Ridge and throughout parts of Virginia. It's a white honeysuckle that doesn't grow more of a vine; it grows more as a bush, and it has a more of a gardenia jasmine smell to it. It's incredibly strong, but it only blooms for a short period of time. Between the advent of summer and the end of spring is when it does. It's a very short time, and it was not in season. This honeysuckle is not in season at the time that we were up there doing I was doing the photography session at the time. Yeah, it doesn't last long at all, does it, Chris? It doesn't. It has a very short life, and then it goes to berry, um, and then that's the end. It just continues to grow afterwards. It's a wonderfully smelling thing, but I had not passed any patches of it, and there was absolutely none of it nearby. And again, it was out of season anyway. Shouldn't have been able to smell it up there anyway, even if it was growing on that part of the mountain. Um, it was out of season. It shouldn't have been in bloom, but it wasn't there. But I could smell it. It was a strong, strong perfume. And I felt compelled to walk over to this group of ferns and to the edge of the where the waterfalls came off the side of the mountain at, um, tumbled off the side of the mountain at. And I could see when I got to it, because something in me going, let's go see. I kept this compulsion to let's go see, to make me say out loud, let's go see. So I went to see. And when I got to the base of the mountain and to the base of the waterfalls, off to the side, off to the right of them, um, it looked like hand and footholds. They weren't stairs per se, but it looked like footholds to where you could climb the side of, the face of the mountain and climb the side of the waterfall, on the side of the waterfall. They looked like they were worn, like people have used them in the past uh, to climb up the waterfall. And I put my hand out to touch one of these little worn handholds in the side of the granite of the mountain there, of the rocks. And the rock face was incredibly jagged. But again, you could see where they'd been worn worn smooth, the edges. These jagged rocks had been places where they were worn smooth in places by people with their hands and their feet over just decades and decades and possibly centuries. And when I put my hand on the first handhold, I was thinking to myself, it would be so easy for me to climb up the side of this. It didn't look difficult at all to do it. This is what I was thinking at the time in my head. Something was in my head was, telling me, I was telling myself this would be so easy to climb up the side of this waterfall to the top. Because I felt the need to see what was there. Something in my head was telling me, you need to see what's up here. That there was something special that I needed to go see. And right when I put my hand on that first handhold, you've heard me talk about her in the past, in other episodes. We're going to cover her more in detail in a future episode. It's someone that has been described to me as my spirit guide, but I always call her my little companion. She's a spiritual entity that's been with me my entire life and is still with me today, in the room with me as we speak now, who has always guided me away from danger, who has guided me towards information, has guided me towards enlightenment. I mean, she's always been there with me, and it's in various ways has communicated with me, verbally, non-verbally, you name it. But right when I put my hand there, I looked up, and on the next rock shelf above me, she was standing there, looking down at me. And I remember my little girl, she doesn't have eyes at all, with her long black hair and her beautiful white dress and black shoes. She just looked right down at me and made her eyeless holes made contact with my eyes. And it felt like somebody had hit me right between the eyes with a rock. And I fell back and I landed flat on my ass. And I could hear something hiss. No. It hissed. It literally fucking hissed. And hissed the word no. But I knew it wasn't my spirit guide at all. I knew it wasn't my eyeless little girl that was telling me that. It was something else. But then I heard the voice of my eyeless little spirit girl, my companion. She's told me, and I always spoke in short sentences, and usually um, she would always speak to me. She still speaks to me like I'm a child. When she does speak to me, um, she said, "Don't do that again." And then she was gone. She shimmered and was gone, like she was never there. I blinked. She shimmered. I blinked. She was gone. And I got scared. I got scared. Um, by that time, hey, Christine, welcome to the party. Um, Good to see you. You'll have to catch up on some of the backstory if you're just coming in. Hopefully it's been rather interesting. Um, by that time, hey, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad you came on tonight. This is a story that actually takes place in Virginia. I know you. I know you've been interested in the stories that take place here in Virginia, Drew. Um, they came up behind me. The couple that I was doing the engagement photos with. They had come back down from the Jeep and they found me sitting flat on my ass and flat on my back in the ferns. And they came up to me and asked me what was going on. Was I okay? And at this time, I was, in my life, I was becoming more and more spiritually aware of the spiritual and paranormal world around me. I was beginning to be more and more and more of a believing that the spiritual and the paranormal were around us constantly, and that there was no way to escape it. They helped me up off my ass, and I looked at both of them, and I asked them, "Where the fuck did you bring me? What is this place?" And they both looked at me and smiled, and they said, "Why?" I said, "Because something wanted me to climb up to the top of this waterfall. And then something didn't want me to do it, and that's how I ended up on my ass." And I told him about the visions I had, the peripheral, in my peripheral vision, the things I was seeing in my peripheral vision, the voices I heard, the humming. And then they proceeded to tell me the story of Staten Falls. Well, their version of the story of Staten Falls. They told me that Staten Falls was known to the locals as Dead Man Falls. And I looked at them and said, "Well, that's really fucking cheery. Why is it called Dead Man Falls?" And they said, "Because people every year come here and they plunge from the very top where I was trying to climb up to, felt compelled to climb up to. They climb to the top of the falls and they say that they slip and fall back to the bottom. You have to remember this is a 75 to 100-foot drop, hitting rocks and then landing in very deep rocky water at the bottom of the falls. And they said they always have 3 to 4 people every year that die there. Well, I thought that number was kind of high when they said it. And I said, "Why the bloody fucking hell would you bring us to a place like that?" And they said, "Well, it's beautiful." That's all they could say, was that it was absolutely beautiful. And I had to agree with them of that. Um, and I said, "So do they consider them accidents?" They said, "Yeah, it's always ruled as an accident. But the accidents actually take place at the exact same overhang over the waterfalls, at the exact same stone overhang at the top of the waterfall. Nobody else slips and falls off of any other part of the waterfall except for this overhang. This overhang is always where they plunge from to their death." Um, Let me pause just for a second to get my thoughts together. I just had a spiritual smack to the face, so give me a second. Okay, I'm back. Fuck, that took a lot out of me. just to let everybody know really quick, some of you may experience or know people that have experienced this before. Um, that when you have a spiritual attack or a spiritual, um, a very negative paranormal encounter, it leaves a scar on your memory. And every time you think about it, that scar could have happened 30, 40 years ago. But every time you think about that scar and think about that moment, that scar becomes a bleeding wound again, and you experience the emotions that you felt at that time. Um, I've got quite a few scars, you can probably imagine, that I've collected over the years from dealing with the paranormal and the supernatural over the years. I've collected quite a few. And I just had the most fascinating vision for a moment there that took my breath away, of that waterfall again and that day, and I literally just now could smell that honeysuckle again, that perfumed honeysuckle again, and it literally took my breath away, and it gave me goosebumps from head to toe when that happened. So so it's kind of like supernatural PTSD. Every time you draw from the memory, you open the wound again, and you experience the fear that you experienced then. It rushes back at you um, in a strange, phantasmagoric sort of way. Um, and that's what just happened to me, if you were wondering. But I'm okay. I just had to get my shit together and push it back down. And I pushed it all back down to where it belonged. Um, I told them about what I was experiencing there. And they were actually concerned for me, which is rare for my clients to be concerned about me. And they decided they thought they had had enough pictures and I had enough frames for them to choose something. So we just completely cut it off then and there and left without further incident. We left. But for the next, gosh, for the next heavy metal, for the next few weeks, I didn't get a lot of sleep. I kept dreaming of this place, of these falls, uh, and every time I dreamt about it, I was wearing. It was a white suit that I was always wearing in the woods, and there was a woman with flaming red hair and the whitest skin and the greenest eyes and long red nails, wearing a long green dress, um, dancing in the ferns around the falls. And she would always hold her hands out to me and say to me in a voice that just, it sounded like glass wind chimes. Her voice did, asking me to dance with her. And I would take her hands, and she would begin to twirl around in the ferns, and I would begin to twirl with her, and we'd go around and around and around. But as we were twirling around in the ferns and dancing, what felt like a waltz, we would get closer and closer um, to the cliffside leading, well, to the side of the mountain that led up to the top of the waterfalls. And in this dream, we would get there, and we would both be spinning so fast that everything blurred. And then when it stopped, we'd be standing at the top of the waterfalls, on that black rock, that black precipice, that black rock, that black overhang that hung over the top of the waterfalls. That was 75, 100 feet up in the air. That hung over the very top of the waterfalls, where everybody apparently would slip and fall from. I would have my back to the edge and she would be in front of me. And she looked at me and told me, "You dance so beautifully." And then she would push me. And before I woke up, push me off the rock down to the bottom of the cliffs, to the bottom of the waterfall. And as I was falling, before I hit the bottom, I woke up. Now that fucking dream happened. I literally, God, it happened for more than 2 weeks. It happened for, God, 3 or 4 weeks. And it happened every fucking night. Um, oh, a Morrigan. I've got a story about a Morrigan. This wasn't a Morrigan. We're going to get into what I believe this was later. Um, and I'd wake up and my bed would be soaking wet from sweating. And I could smell when I woke up. It was a fucking night terror. I'd wake up screaming, covered in sweat. Sweat soaked through all the sheets and the whatever covers that I had on me and all my clothes. And when I would stop screaming, I could smell very faintly the smell of honeysuckles in the air. Like I said, this went on for weeks. This dream would just not fucking stop. And I felt compelled to go back to Staten Falls, not because I felt like I was being called back at the time. Then again, when I do think back on it, it could have been a compulsion that was possibly not up to me. It was up to whatever was there that was bringing me there. Um, I finally went back to Staten Falls to find out, to see what I could learn about it. And I stopped in the town of Amherst, of course, to chat with the locals about Staten Falls. Um, and a lot of people had pretty much the same story when it came to those falls. Um, that the people who went there, who died at the waterfalls, who slipped and fell at the waterfall, were not the adventurous type. They were usually in a group but would wander off from the group. And before the group realized that they were at the top of the falls, and right when they were going to call them, they would fall off. Right when they would call their name, they would fall off the top of the waterfall. And, of course, die terribly. Smashed against the rocks at the bottom of the waterfall. Um, by the way, the picture that you see that I use as my thumbnail for the video for tonight is actually part of Staten Creek Falls. That's the bottom part of Staten Creek Falls, for those who don't know. It's not the entire falls. That thing keeps going up and up and up. Like I said, it's a series of waterfalls till it goes up the side of the mountain. Once I had heard all the stories, and they said the people in town didn't go to the falls anymore. They just didn't go. The locals did not go, and they wouldn't let their kids go to the falls. They kept them away from it. They said they were cursed. The falls were cursed, to put it simply. The waterfall was cursed. The land was cursed. That most of the deaths that were occurring, and this is based on my research, just not what the locals told me, were from people from the surrounding counties that would come there, or hikers that would stumble upon Staten Falls and they would go there. Including this year, going back as far as I could, and I researched it for a bit, and actually, there's been about 145 recorded deaths by accident at Staten Falls over the last 45 years. Um, and the last one that I had heard of was of a 23-year-old girl, or young lady. Everybody's a girl if you're not as old as I am. From Appomattox, Virginia, who went up there with some friends. And she fell from that precipice at the top of the waterfalls and died. And that was in 2020 when she died. Of all years for it to happen, it was in 2020. And the only reason I had heard about it was that I was actually traveling. We have an office in Appomattox County for our family business. We have one of our offices. We have one in Farmville, Virginia, one in Appomattox, Virginia, one in Blue Ridge, and one in Chester, Virginia. We have offices all throughout the place. And I had read it in the local rag in 2020, the local newspaper there about the young lady who died at Satan's Creek Falls. And it stuck in my head. But as I was heading, I was determined to go back up here to see if what I experienced would possibly happen again. And I went by myself, which was not very smart, I know. Before people start throwing shit at me and telling me that was stupid, I know. That was a dumb idea for me to do it. Um, I got up there, but the trail leading down to the falls um, was not as inviting as it was when I first went up there. It was dark. I mean, it was black. There was no light coming through the canopy anymore whatsoever. The whole tone of the place had gone dark. It was chilling. There were no more animals. There were no more cicadas sounds. Um, there was no more wind rustling. It was still. It was completely still all the way down to the trail to the waterfall. And when I finally got down to the waterfall, again, it did not feel as beautiful and as inviting as it first did when I first saw it. Um, and I stood there for the longest time, staring up at that precipice again, at that rock where I felt compelled to want to climb up to, which thank goodness I was kept from doing so. Um, and I just kept whispering out loud, "What the fuck are you? I know you're here. What the fuck are you?" Not many people probably can relate to this, but I'm going to try to describe it the best way I can. I didn't get a verbal response, but I got an emotional response that hit me in the face like a bag of wet oatmeal. It just hit me in the face and splatted as hard as it could. Um, of anger. It was mad at me because I had been the one to get away. And I felt like that. I felt like I was a mouse that had found the only safe part of the cage to keep the snake from eating me. And the snake was sitting, it was standing, it was curled up outside my little safe hole and staring at me. That's the feeling that I felt, that I was that mouse who had found safety. But right at the edge of safety and right beyond that safety, the snake was ready to devour me again. That's what I felt when I was there. Um, I felt fear. I felt an overwhelming feeling of loathing, something that hated me, that it despised me. And I felt it was because I'd been the one that had gotten away. Needless to say, I turned around to leave, and I literally fell on my knees because it would not stop bombarding me with these feelings. And I fell down on my hands and knees, and I looked back up at the precipice again while I was on my hand and my knees. And I saw the woman with the red hair again and the white dress. Well, not the white dress, the dress. But I could see her eyes, and her eyes burned. They were no longer green. They were red coals. And they lit up her entire face as she was staring down at me. And I could feel she was pissed. It was pissed. It did not want me to be there anymore. It wanted to punish me for getting away. If it couldn't have me, then nobody could have me. Did not want me to be there anymore. But I literally then crawled on my hands and knees back up that trail till I got back to the Jeep. I did not stand up until I was at the front of my Jeep again. And I stood up covered in mud and filth. Um, I got up and I crawled my way over into the driver's seat and I got the fuck out of there. At the time, I had not done a lot of research behind spirits of water spirits, um, spiritual predators, supernatural predators um, at the time that existed in water. And once I got out of there and got my shit back, and by the time when I left, I never had those dreams again. When I left that place after returning there and getting bitch slapped by whatever this was, um, I never returned back. I never had those dreams again after that. But again, I was scarred. I had the supernatural PTSD going on. It had scarred me psychologically and spiritually, and I still have that scar from it today, um, from barely escaping from something like that. That in pretty much every culture in the entire world, and they have a spirit, a water spirit that is not a beneficial entity. In Japan, they have the Hosube and the Kappa. Um, in Greek mythology, they have a Nereid. Um, and a lot of Slavic countries, they have the, oh, what is that thing called? A Vokalok. That's what that thing is called. Ugh, things are hideous. Uh, and the Pacific Islanders and throughout the Caribbean, there is the Simbi. Um, but just to say, none of these spirits these water spirits are beneficial. They lure people, sometimes mostly men, sometimes children, sometimes women. Sometimes they don't care who they lure, but they lure them to their death in the water. That is their purpose, is to lure people to their doom, to their death. Um, and they do it every so often. They do it at certain times of the year. You know, it all depends on the nature of the spirit. And it appears in every culture as something different. But in 90% of the water spirits, the way they appear in other cultures, they usually take the form of a woman um, who is unnaturally beautiful, who has certain parts of her that are supernatural, say her eyes, or her hair moves about her head without any wind, or she can go through the water. Oh, think of the Kelpie as well. That just popped in my head. Kelpies, which were famous for bringing people to the water's edge. They would appear as beautiful women, and they would drown the men who sought to get a kiss from the Kelpie. They would pull them in the water and they would drown. And in some stories, they would feast on the bodies after they pulled them into the water, um, which would lend them from being in the supernatural realm into more of the cryptid realm then, as something living in the water that would devour you. Sometimes in some cultures, they would have a there was the Marunge in Africa that could appear as a man or a woman. It actually, the front half was a woman and the back half was a man. Depending on who it was trying to lure to the water, it would turn that part of its body to face them. It would turn backwards to be a man and turn forward to be a woman. But at the end, it would always, be the end of its prey when it got close enough to the water to drown. And in my research and studying these water things, these water spirits, I came to the conclusion that the thing that still fucking lives at Staten Creek Falls in Amherst, Virginia, nestled in George Washington State National State Park, it's still there. And it's still killing people. It lures them to the top of the rock, and it pushes them off the waterfall, and they fucking die. And it hasn't stopped. I don't know if there is a way to stop it. I have never felt compelled, after my experiences, to go there to try to stop it. But it's still doing it. Like I said, the most recent one that I'm aware of, again in 2020, with that young lady from Appomattox County who died there. And she was in a group of 6 people. And she was the only one that went to the top of that waterfall. And the only one who plunged back to the bottom of it dead. It's still there. it's still killing people. I think it's a purely spiritual being. I don't think it has a physical, it doesn't have a mortal form whatsoever. It is a malevolent entity. And God help anybody who says the word demon to me, because this is not a fucking demon. This is more of a, it's not an elemental, it's more of a nature spirit. I never took the time to explore maybe what the origins of how this thing came to be there. But something tells me, truly tells me, that it's been there long before man settled in that area. The Europeans settled in that area. That it quite possibly had been killing and feeding off of the local tribal people that lived there. The various Indian nations and Indian tribes that would travel through the mountains there. That it would, kill people there. But found, once the Europeans came over, found many, many more people in which to kill and to feed off of. And I'm saying feed off of because there's got to be, in the supernatural and paranormal world, there's no such thing as coincidence. Things just don't do things just because. They do it for a reason. Um, if it's for something for revenge or just pure malice, they're going to feed off of the energies that are given off when a person dies. When they die, and the energy that makes up their soul, or whatever you want to call it, leave their body. Um, I think it stays there and it gathers that energy to continue to manifest itself there. So it'll always have a presence there to take more victims. Well, guys, I hope you enjoyed tonight's tale. I've got plenty more from the state of Virginia and from a lot of small localities I'm more than happy to share with you if you're interested. You can look ahead at some of the upcoming lives that I have going on. Some of them take place in Virginia. Some of them do not. But I hope you do stick around to enjoy them again. I hope everybody enjoyed tonight's Paranormal Fireside Chat. I look forward to having you all back for the next one. If you like what you see, I please ask you to hit the like button. If you didn't like it, hit the dislike button. If you want to leave a comment, please leave a comment. If you have constructive criticism, please leave it. I'm open to it. I'm not easily offended whatsoever. I take your comments and your criticism in a constructive manner and hope to make a better show the next time around. Again, I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. I had a great time telling this story. Again, I'm sorry, but there is such thing as paranormal PTSD, and I got smacked hard with it tonight, and everybody got to experience it with me. If you feel so inclined, you can find me on Twitter at VoodooMan3. At Voodoo3. You can also Google Mike the Naked Bigfoot, or go on Twitter and go to Mike the Naked Bigfoot, and you'll find me. If you want to follow me, feel free to. I talk about many things on Twitter, including my channel here and the paranormal. I talk a lot of shit as well, and I like to make people laugh, in addition to telling terrifying stories of the supernatural. Please encourage your friends, if they're interested in anything that I'm talking about, to please pop in and visit and spend some time with us. I like meeting new people and talking with them, maybe exchanging stories with them. And as always, I do love you. I do appreciate you. Have an awesome night, everyone. Until we meet again.